Hi, my name is Thomas Foster and this is another episode of a multi-part tutorial on Reason 12. In this video we talk about mixing and mastering, and I show you exactly everything you need to know about the mixer of Reason 12. Good to have you here, let's go! We open the mixer here with this little button on the left side of the word mixer. To see more of the mixer, we close the rack and the sequencer, also with these little buttons beside rack and sequencer. Now we see the mixer, but as the mixer is really big, we are not able to see everything at the same time. So for this, here's very useful one channel where we see the whole channel, and the blue square shows us what we see. So for example, in this case, we see the in, this is here, the dynamic and EQ. Dynamic EQ is here. And now I can click and move this down to see the lower part of the mixer, like the faders. So let's take a look to one channel to understand what we see here. This is the input. Here we can change the gain. If the signal is not strong enough, we can make it louder. We can change the order of everything we have here in the mixer. Here we have the dynamics, means the compression and the gate. Here we have the EQ and the filters. The green buttons here are the sends, where we can make a reverb or a delay and other effects for sure. And here we have the fader and the panning, mute and solo. Here on the bottom we see the name of the track. And on the right side we see the master channel, starting with the master compressor. In the master channel, all the tracks together get in, and we can make a compressor on all tracks together. And we have the returns of the sends. So all the sends that we have here go to the returns. These are the master sends. I'm sorry, I said it wrong in the beginning. Here we have the master sends. So from here we send to the reverb and it comes back here at the FX returns. And here we have the master fader. So if we want to make a fade out of everything, we can do this with this fader here at the end of our song. To get exactly to 0, let's use the command key on Mac or the string key on PC. Just click one time by holding down the command or the string key on our keyboard, brings us exactly to 0. Also here, if you are somewhere, click, you are exactly at this position, at the main position, let's call it like this. Okay, let's take a closer look to one channel. I have here a song of the Beatles. Here Comes the Sun. I'm sure you know the song. Let's listen to it.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's over.
It's not really mixed by now, but we can do this now together. Let's take a closer look to the lead vocal of Maria, who is singing beautiful in this track. While the track is running, we can click on solo to just hear her voice.
Little darling, it's been a long, cold
Or we can click mute to not hear this track. In this case, we have also to mute the doubling.
It feels like it.
Okay, let's stay on solo so we can work now on the vocals of Maria. Again, to the input. In the past, at analog mixers, it was extremely important, the input, because you had microphones with less volume or some guitars with a lot of volume, and you have to make the volume fitting to the mixer. So this was extremely important. Today it's not so important because all our tracks are basically at the same at the right volume. But sometimes if your vocal does not have enough gain, you can change this here and make the gain a little bit more. In this case, we stay with everything exactly on 0. Here you can invite the phase. You don't use this very often. This is more interesting. Here we can change the order of our effects. So at the moment we have first the dynamic, then the EQ, and then the inserts. But there's a button called Insert Pre, means the inserts are not post the dynamic and the EQ, they are pre. So click and now the inserts are here. How do we need this? Sometimes it can be useful that you maybe want to have a distortion or something before you go in the EQ where you filter it. But it's not very often that it's necessary to change this. If you need it, you know now how to do this. With the next button, we can say the dynamic should be after the EQ. The main reason why the dynamics are always before the EQ is because if I change something on the EQ, I'm also changing the volume. So I also have to change again the EQ. That means every time I change something on the volume, I have to change the compression, maybe, if the EQ is in front of the dynamics. So normally it's good if the dynamics are in front of the EQ. Here we have a button Filter to Dynamic. Why do we need this? The filter, that's these two knobs here. I can change here the sound of my volume. If I click this, I don't hear what I'm doing here. It's just changing the signal that goes into the compression. I could use this, for example, to make a de-esser. So if I say I want to filter out the low frequencies, so I just hear the high frequencies where you have the S and Zischlaute, we say in Germany, then the compressor reacts just on the S, so you have a kind of de-esser that you can make. But for this, there are own tools to make a de-essing that works better. So also this you don't need so often, but it's nice to have it. So now we come to something really important, and that's the compression. What is a compression doing? You need a compression if you have too much dynamic. But what does too much dynamic mean? Sometimes your singer sings with less volume in the verse and extremely loud in the chorus. So if the difference between the parts with less volume and the phrases with a lot of volume is too big, then you have too much dynamic. You use the compression to reduce the dynamic. How does it work? First, we have to turn it on. Then we have to decide for a ratio. 2:1 means that everything that is higher than the threshold is divided with 2. 5:1 means that everything that is on top of the threshold will be divided with 5. So let's go to something like 4:1, and now we give the threshold as high as possible, means to 0 dB, means the compression is nothing doing. And now while we are listening, we go down with the threshold. The more I go to the left, the more the compression will work. And we'll see here at the gain reduction how much the compression is doing. The more it's doing, the more lights are blinking, right? And we also will hear that the compression is working on the louder parts to bring down the volume. Let's check this out.
Since it's been here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I say.
If we want to hear it more extreme, we also can put up the ratio.
Since it's been here comes the
Now you hear it totally extremely.
Here comes the sun, I say, it's alright.
One more time.
Since it's been here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo.
For me, that's fine. Now we have here a noise gate. What is a noise gate doing? Whenever the volume is less than the threshold, it's closing and nothing is going through. Really nothing, no. It depends on the range. So if the range is 0, the volume is the same, but the more you go down with the range, the less volume is when you go under the threshold. Let's check this out. First we have to click on to enable the gate.
Here comes the sun, I say it's alright.
So now you see that just some words are coming through.
Here comes the sun.
The more I go to the left, the more of her voice comes through.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
And here I can change the release time. How fast is it closing? That's what you do with the hold and the release.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the...
Now you see it's slowly closing because we have 300 milliseconds of hold and 600 of release. And that's what we want. We don't want it to close too fast, otherwise the noise sometimes does not sound good.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, I say.
Here you can put it into the expander mode, but I think this is enough on the gate. Much more important, the filter and the equalizer sections. So here we have 2 filters, high pass and low pass. We have here 4 bands, 1 high frequency shelf EQ, 2 parametric EQs in the middle, and the low frequencies, again, a shelf EQ. The shelf EQ you can put into a bell EQ. So what does that mean? Let's start with the filters. To see what your filters and your equalizers are doing, Reason 12 made a nice graphic. That's the spectrum EQ. So that's an analyzer. You see here the low frequencies starting with 20 Hertz, going up to 20 kilohertz. What does kilohertz mean? That's 20,000 hertz. All right. And now we can listen to the low pass filter that is cutting the high frequencies. So we put it on with this button here. Now we see it, what it's doing. And the more I go to the left, the more I'm cutting the high frequencies until nothing is left anymore. Let's listen to this.
It's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, I say.
In this case, I don't want to cut the high frequencies, so no low pass filter for me on this track. Let's check out the high pass filter. With the high pass filter, we are cutting the low frequencies. Let's check this out.
It's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes the...
So we see here the frequencies of the vocal of Maria. And her voice starts at something like 300 Hertz.
Here comes the sun.
It's somewhere here.
Here comes the...
That's the low frequencies of her voice. And then we have some overtones. And here in the higher range, there's more the S and F and all the high stuff that you make with your mouse. So let's cut the low frequencies that we don't need, means everything that is lower than the 300. I go up, and if I go higher than 300, or in practice it starts at 250, you will hear that the vocal of Maria is getting a little bit thin.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Here comes the sun.
So it's good that you cut as much as possible, as long you don't reach the lowest frequencies of her voice. So in this case, with 180, we are fine. She has a high voice, so everything is on top of 200, so there's no problem. but we
Here comes
erased
the sun.
the not so nice low frequencies.
Here comes the sun, I say.
Then we have a shelf EQ. To hear the EQ, we have to turn the whole equalizer section on with this button here. And then we can push the high frequencies or bring them down with a shelf EQ. A shelf EQ is making everything louder that is higher than the frequency. In the pre-axis, you see it's a curve, so it's starting much earlier. And here you can change the frequency. So I stay now on 5 kilohertz and show you with the volume button, with the gain button, where it says dB, like, yeah, that's how much dB do I make it louder or less volume. I can show you what the EQ is doing.
It's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
Let's make it 13 dBs higher and change the frequency so you can hear what it's doing.
It's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes.
And we also can change it, the shelf EQ, to make it a bell EQ like the other two EQs here in the middle. Then it sounds like this.
I say it's alright.
So in this case, I don't want to make it a bell EQ. I want to stay on a shelf EQ. I just want to push like 4 dB, and this may be somewhere here at 8 kilohertz is good.
I say it's alright.
Maybe too much.
Here comes the sun.
That sounds good. Maybe we take a look to the high middle frequencies. We can push the volume, the gain. We can change the frequency, and we can change the Q, means how fat is our EQ or how thin is it. Let's make it a little bit thinner, so we take not so many frequencies on the left and the right, like we go to the left side, where the Q is very low, means we have a lot of frequencies that we take. And let's listen.
Here comes the sun, I say.
Yeah, now we hear a little bit of distortion because the volume is too much. Let's go to 5 kilohertz
It's alright.
and bring in just
Here
1 or 2
comes the
dBs.
sun.
I like it.
Here comes.
Let's use the second middle frequencies, the low mid frequency, to, let's make it a little bit thinner,
The sun, I say.
bring
It's
out some of the low mids. So maybe something like this.
alright.
It's too much.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
Now we can listen what the equalizer is doing.
It's alright. Here comes the sun.
With it sounds a little bit more clear and more defined, what is good. Here we have a low shelf equalizer, so we can push the low frequencies or bring them down. At the voice of her, we should go up to 390 or something. Now we
Here
can
comes the sun, I say.
change how many
It's
low
alright.
frequencies she has. If you hear the voice alone, maybe you could think it's better with a lot of low frequencies. But you will see in the mix, it's not good to have too much of them. So be careful.
Here comes the sun.
For me, it sounds nice if we don't change the low
comes the
frequencies.
sun.
So we stay like this and say it's fine like this. So here we have the inserts. We come a little bit later to the inserts. Let's continue with the sends. From here you can send something to the master sends. So if I turn on this button and I send a lot of volume,
I say it's alright.
it's sending the signal to the master send, from the master send into our effect device. In this case, it's the RV7000. And from there, it goes back to the FX return. So you see the volume of the voice of Maria here.
Here comes the sun.
Because we're sending it. and we're bringing it back here.
Here comes the sun.
And for sure I can change the effect here.
I say it's alright. Here comes the sun.
Alright. Don't forget to turn it on, otherwise you hear nothing.
Here comes the sun.
And you can change the effect. You can totally change the effect. You can use something else instead, the RV7000. You can change all the knobs. You can change here the preset of this effect and choose another room. So you can make it absolutely your own. For the vocal, I think this is not so bad.
I say
Sorry?
it's alright. Here comes the sun.
Maybe it was a little bit too much.
Here comes the sun. I say.
But this, for me, it sounds totally nice. Let's take a look to the other sands. On the number 2,
It's alright.
we have a very small room. It's more like a drum room. I click here on Edit, so we can see the drum. Let's open it. The drum live end here.
Here comes the sun.
I don't like this on the vocal, so let's turn it off. On number 3,
Here
All
comes
Film Score. It's a very long and big room that is maybe good for strings, or if you produce a score for your orchestra, this is great. But in this case, I don't like it. We stay with number 1. But let's listen to number 4.
the sun. I say.
There is echo. Let's take a look to the echo. So we click here on Warm Echo, Edit. Now we see it.
It's alright.
And normally you put the tempo in milliseconds. So you can make a small echo, a
Here
small
comes
delay,
the sun.
or a long delay.
Here comes the sun. I say.
But it's very interesting to click here on this sync button to create a delay in time. And now you see that you have a quarter note, an eighth note, or whatever you need. And yes, a quarter note, an eighth note, or 8 dotted is the thing we use most on a delay. So let's listen to quarter notes.
It's alright. Here comes the sun.
I like this very much.
Here comes the sun. I say.
We can filter it a little bit.
Alright. Here comes the sun.
Yeah, for me it sounds nice. It's still too much. Let's turn on the reverb on send 1 and the send to the echo. Very slowly
Here
we bring
comes
in the volume.
sun. I say it's alright.
I think that's enough. It sounds very nice. Now let's close the rack. So now you understand the sense. Here we have the fader.
Comes the sun.
So we can change the volume of
Here
our
comes
track.
the sun.
Again, with string control or command, you can put it exactly to 0. Again, if I just click one time by holding down the control key, and we are exactly at 0.
I say it's alright.
But I want a little
Here
bit more.
comes the sun.
+5 could be good.
Here comes the.
So we talked now about the input section where we can change the order and change the gain. We talked about the dynamics like the compressor and the gate. We talked about the EQ with the filters, high shelf, high mid, low mid and low shelf EQ. We talked about the sands that are good for reverb and delay, but sure you also can make other effects. But until now, we did not talk about the inserts. So in this case, our insert is on bypass. Let's change this because we want to hear the inserts. Now let's click on Edit Inserts so we see the inserts. This is the audio track of Maria, of the lead vocal. And here, this black slot here are the inserts. So if we want to hear an insert on this track, we have to open the browser. We have to go to Effects, and here we can take a look to all the effects. Why don't we check out the phaser? Or a distortion.
Here comes the sun. Dun-dun-dun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright.
So here you can make special effects for your voice, and you can listen here with bypass, means without the insert effects.
Here comes the sun.
Sorry.
Here comes the sun. I say.
In this case, I stay without the effects. So what else do we have? We have here the panning, so you can place it on the left side
It's alright. Here comes the
or
sun.
on the right side. If you have a stereo signal, you can make it mono. Here it's mono or just a little bit mono. You see it here on the graphic, on the slider, what is happening. It's going more and more to the middle, the more you go to the left. In this case, I have a mono signal, so it doesn't matter what I do here with this knob. We can mute it. We already had this. Yeah, there's something very important on the output, because we can make groups. They are called buses. So let me click on the bass drum and I select all the tracks with the shift key. I click on the last drum track. So now all the drums are selected. And now I I click one time here on the output, and here it says new output bus. And now we created a bus for all the drums. So let's call this drums. And now we can change the volume of all drums.
Here comes the sun.
Let's listen to
I
this.
say it's alright.
And beside the volume that you can change here, you also can use all the effects on the whole drums. So for example, you could filter the whole drums with one knob, what can be very useful. So sometimes it's really cool if you make groups, so you have one drum group, one keyboard group, one guitar group, one vocal group. Then it's much easier to create a good mix, because with one knob you can change the volume of all drums and you don't have to make 10 movements to make the drums louder. Now we talked a lot about the channels. Let's talk about the master channel. So all your tracks, the drums, the synthesizer, the vocals, they go together in a mix on the master channel. And here we can change the volume of all the tracks. And we can create a compression on the master. So let's turn the master compressor on. Let's go to 4:1, the ratio. You can make it 2:1 or 10:1. I would choose 4:1, what is good for a track like this. And now we go up with the threshold, so it's doing nothing. And then we go down slowly, 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 and watch what is happening with the gain reduction. The more the compression is working, the more it's putting down the volume, and you see this putting down the volume here with this graphic. Let's take a look. It does not sound nice, it's too much.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
That sounds nice for me. So always take a look to the graphic. It should not be too much, then it does not sound good. If it's doing nothing, then it's like it's not on, right? That's not useful. But at the end, your ear should decide. The graphic should just help to better understand what you're listening to, what you're hearing. We have here the attack. With the attack, you can say how fast does it put down the volume if the volume gets over the threshold. With the release, you could say how fast does it go back. And here we have the makeup gain, so you can make the volume at the end of the compression louder. But this is not necessary, as we use the master inserts to change the volume. So the master inserts. To see the master inserts, we click on Edit Insert. And here we have the master section. And here we have many effects. They are called M-Class, the M-Class Equalizer, Stereo Imager, Compressor, and Maximizer. So at the moment we are on bypass, so we would not hear what we are doing here. So let's turn it on. Again, with Edit Insert, you open them so you can see them. And now let's take a look to the EQ. Now we could change here the EQ. But I don't want the EQ, the sound is nice for me. Here we can make a stereo imager. That means you can make it more stereo than it is. How does this work? It's mixing the different phase of the left side to the right side and the other phase of the right side to the left side. At the left side it's mono, here it's without a change like you mixed it, and here it's maximum stereo. But be careful, if you use this too much, it does not sound nice mono. The more you put in this here to white, the less it's getting mono compatible. We have this knob for the low frequencies and for the high frequencies. So I would suggest not to make too much at the low frequencies, as humans are not good in hearing at low frequencies where it's coming from. So it's not really useful to do this, but it's useful at the high frequencies. I go to 20. Let's listen to it.
Sun, 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 here comes.
All right, now we have a compression. We don't need it as we already used the master compressor, but very important, the maximizer. With the maximizer, it's a strong limiter. You see that your track is loud enough. And you can change this simply by changing the input gain. If the input gain is on the left side, it's not loud enough, and now you can make it stronger, 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 and you see here the gain reduction, how much it's doing. At an unplugged track, a jazz track with real instruments, I would do just a little bit, not too much. At an EDM track, I would make a little bit more. So we go to on here.
Sun, 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 here comes.
Yeah, that was too much. Again.
Sun, here comes. Sun, 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 here comes.
Yeah, maybe it's already a little bit too much.
Sun, here comes. Sun, 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 here comes.
For me, that sounds nice. Oh, I still have one more thing. If you like producing music like me, then you probably know the problem of finding good drum and percussion sounds. Those who came with the music program do not sound right, and on all internet sites where you would get the really good stuff, you pay a fortune. On all? No, not really. There's a webpage in whose development I'm involved. Mugent.com. Mugent is written with M-U-G-E-N-T, and it comes from musically intelligent. Mugent. You can find drum beats that sounds exactly like what you hear in the charts or in the big clubs in Ibiza, Miami or Berlin. The webpage reminds a little bit of Google. You can just use the text search, get immediately results you can listen to and download for free, or you can use the menus with which you can narrow down the search. On Mugent you can find drum sounds to every genre, music loops, so complete beats, percussion single sounds and loops, cool bass riffs, funky brass and synth riffs, guitars, and all sorts of sound effects, from birds to cars, from the sound of the sea to helicopters. With me, there is no more production where I didn't use the sounds from Mugent.com. Take a look, you will love it. My name is Thomas Foster. Thanks for following. Always stay creative. Cheers.